I'm going to be showing you how you can get ahead of 99% of print on demand sellers using strategies that are completely attainable even to complete beginners. And this is coming from my own experience of generating over $25 million in sales over the past decade and currently running a community called WeScale where we help people start and grow their own print on demand brands. And the reason that we're doing this today is that the print on demand industry is growing rapidly and it's still an awesome opportunity. But for anybody who's trying to be, exceptional or an outlier and see disproportionate returns for their time, it's important that we're aware of how the majority of the market is moving and what we can do to stand out and be head and shoulders above the rest. And so this is coming from my own experience of spending plenty of time mixed right into the middle of the 99%, if not, lower end of the bell curve. And I made a lot of mistakes and it took years of trial and error before I finally started to piece things together. And honestly, the things that ended up working the best were things that I could have been doing differently from day one had I just known about them. And the real difference between these two scenarios is when you're in the 99%, you can definitely make a living, you can make an income, but your upside is always going to be somewhat limited to, a couple $1,000s per month, which, for some people that's decent and nothing to turn your nose up at, certainly. But if our goal is to build a long-term brand and ultimately get to the six-figure plus per month mark and something that can, really have a meaningful impact on our lives, there's things that we're able to do a little bit differently that make us stand out. And, when I started off in this process, I was in the 99%, and then through this trial and error, eventually got to where I am now. To make this more realistic, there should just be bruises and scars and broken bones, but we get the visual because now we're at the point where we've had multiple brands that have been acquired, and we're currently running brands today that do over seven figures a year using exactly what we're going to be talking about. And the other reason this is important is that aside from just standing out from the rest of the market, it also makes your life a lot easier. And I love this graphic showing like when you're starting off in print on demand, it seems like, oh, it's just t-shirts, but we say that because we don't really know any better. And then as we start to become more aware and we learn more about all the ins and outs, it can start feeling like we're trying to do a rocket science equation because we start getting hit with all these ads and, different influencers telling us all these different strategies, which is all well and good. But at least in my experience, it really led me astray more often than not. And it led to me thinking that, being successful in print on demand, and it required a heck of a lot more than, I ever realized. And then there's this interesting downward effect that happens later on, which is as you get even more experience, you kind of return back to this similar starting point, realizing that it's really just about the t-shirts, or it's really just about the products, to put it differently. And we just have that same realization, but from a different mindset than what we started off as. Because in the beginning, we were saying it out of ignorance, and now we're saying it out of experience. And getting to this point sooner rather than later, I've seen to be the number one thing that has led to like outsized returns. Like basically the people that focus on just making the best products possible normally end up being the ones that stand out. But how do we jumpstart this bell curve so that we can get over there as quickly as possible? Because once we get to this point, it puts everything in perspective. It helps us realize that yes, there are all these extraneous details and, ins and outs of the business model, but at the end of the day, the product is the most important. And so we're going to be breaking down the difference between, a 99% seller versus the 1% sellers in terms of their mindset, their behavior, the strategy, tools, and their overall long-term thinking or outlook. And the good news is that this does not require being in the top 1% intelligence. I'm certainly not, or the top 1% work ethic. There's definitely people who work a lot harder than I do. And it also certainly does not require having, the top 1% investment or capital available to throw at the business. It's not really any of these things. And so to start off, we have a chart down here. We're going to be comparing side by side the difference between the two sellers in terms of like what it really means for us as business owners is, so people that are in the 99%, these are people who, end up doing it as a hobby or maybe some side income. And, again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, but the earning upside or the earning potential here rather is rather limited. And not only is it limited to, and these are ballpark numbers, obviously, but anywhere from 0 to 5 to 10,000 a month in profit. But not only that, it's normally not building like a sellable asset, opposed to people on the 1% side. They're building a real asset, and they're building something that can compound over time, ultimately getting them to the point that, like, our brand last year did about $15,000 in net profit per month. So about $500 net profit per day while we were working aggressively part-time hours on it. We had a lot of other focuses, but these sellers rather, are capable of making upwards of, 20 to 100,000. And most importantly, they're building a real business. They're building an asset that can actually run, like, whether if they're there or not. I'm working on the handwriting, I promise. But basically, they're building a business that's able to run by itself if they want to. And so if this is the goal, and the other piece is that the sales trajectory for somebody who's selling like the 99%, it normally, a lot of times it can look a lot like this, like a lot of spikes and dips. And on the 1% side, when they really stand out in the market and they zig where other people are zagging and they are building a compounding asset, there's definitely still spikes and dips, but it's a much cleaner upward trajectory opposed to over here. It's a little bit more flatlined and unpredictable. And so the biggest first thing to point out about the difference in how they approach the business in general, this is getting into the things that they do that anybody can do, it doesn't cost you anything, is most print-on-demand sellers, and I was like this when I started out, they start off with like no clear goal in mind. So they just know they want to make money. They don't have, a clear end point in mind. Maybe they throw out a dollar amount and they're like, I want to make 10K per month, but there's not like a clearly defined target. And this leads to kind of this half in, half out thinking, which is extremely dangerous because there's low commitment, high expectations. And that's just a recipe for disappointment. And when that sets in, then it's natural for us to either burn out or, at the very least, look for other opportunities or shiny objects to pursue. And is even worse because it leads to us having unrealistic expectations of ourselves. And we kind of sit down and expect us with zero previous experience or anything, not even a single sale under our belt. We expect that because we see YouTube videos and stuff out there talking about, how you can make money selling t-shirts, we expect that that's going to be us. And when that doesn't turn out to be the case immediately, it really sets us back. And so this leads to a self-critical mindset, which leads to mistakes. And then it, just furthers the internal dialogue of maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe it's, I'm not right for this business. Maybe I'm not right for any business. And so when something goes wrong, their self-confidence collapses and they end up quitting before any real feedback loop is able to begin. And so the real root issue here is there's no strong foundation of like who they are and where they want to go. And the good news is that the way that you can get to this is very, very manageable. It starts by just setting a very clear goal. Like, I want to build a brand that earns $10,000 per month. And taking this a step further, and it's not written here, I recommend also having a, like, why is this important? Like, what is that going to do for you? Like, dollars in the bank. And I used to just ignore this when people say like money doesn't make you happy. I used to be like, all right, yeah, I'll relax. I'll let you know when I get there, if I come to the same conclusion. But from being there, I now realize what they actually mean is like having the money in your bank account. It's just, different pixels in your checking account dashboard. Like, it means literally nothing. What it actually means is what you're able to do with it. It's the travel, the impact you're able to have on friends and family, and the overall freedom. I know that is illegible, but we get the point. So I recommend, or what I observe is they have very clear reasons for starting the business that they are, as well as it's not just tied to a numerical value. And next, they have a all-in, or otherwise known as burn the boats mindset, meaning they are committed to the long term. And a really simple hack for this that can jumpstart this whole process is you don't just have to have long-term, like 5-10 year mindset. Just set a medium term period of time, like 6 months. Like, a couple of people that I've spoken with from our community who have had really great results said similar stories or approaches where they said that they were giving themselves, I think it was 6 months in both cases, that when they started from day one, they told themselves that they have 6 months to figure this out. And that by day 181, they were going to reevaluate and look back on how far they've come, the progress they've made, and if this is something that they really want to, continue doing. And when they set that goal for themselves, it essentially gives them the luxury, you could call it, of being able to just lock in, ignore all the noise, both external and internal, and just commit to a process and really see, like, giving themselves a shot. It's kind of like when you start a new diet. If we say up front, like, this is the goal, but then when by day 3, we have the internal thought that says, it's fine. It's healthy to have one off day. Like, it's okay. And then that voice wins over, and then this junk food comes out, the gym gets skipped, and then that's one day down. And then the next day we're like, well, what's 2 days really? And then, and so that's the dangerous slippery slope that a lot of people can end up on. And the same thing applies to, starting a business. And they also have very realistic self-talk or objective thinking, you could call it, meaning they're well aware that when they're starting off with something brand new, it's going to be a lot of practice. And there's going to be times where they feel like they're not as good as they could be, because it would be unrealistic for us to sit down doing something brand new and expect ourselves to perform as the top 1%. So they are committed to the long term with a clear vision and goal. They basically lock in for a set amount of time, and they recognize that it's okay that they aren't good at it in the beginning. That's normal. And they're very objective about the feedback that they receive, because they know that mistakes that they make is just data, and it's not their identity. This gives them a real core advantage, that they're able to build their identity around growth or the progress that they're making, not the outcome. So basically picturing the two scenarios, like the 99% person is going through this whole process only seeing it as binary, like either they get to the win and they make the money, or it's zero. Opposed to, on the other end, we have people that are seeing every day that they're showing up and doing something. That's a +1 for them. And this person, they're making compounding progress every single day. Every day feels like a win. Not to say it feels easy or anything of the sort, but every day it feels like they're building upon itself. And notice so far, everything we've mentioned is just, this could apply to any business. This could be consulting. It could be, starting a software company. It's all the same thing. It's about basically how you approach doing hard things in general. Is when you're able to persevere and stay long enough, you end up seeing results. Because a lot of times, time is just the missing variable in most people's success formula. And it gives them long enough to see results, get real feedback, and actually make progress. And that is what gives you confidence. In the beginning, you're not going to feel confident because you have no reason to be confident. You can have excitement and certainty that you're going to figure it out come hell or high water. But at the end of the day, the confidence is built by the results that you get over time. And so next, the behavior differences between the two approaches. The 99% of people, they start off, this is like in their day-to-day. They start the day and they have no real plan or goal. It's just sit down at the laptop and kind of see what comes up. So then they end up doing whatever surface level thing pops into their head first, like tweaking the colors of the logo, doing the homepage again, even though they know it's not that important. They scroll social media and watch random YouTube videos and convince themselves that it's actually being productive, when the only time you should be watching new videos or trying to learn something is when the very next step in front of you is either not clear or you're not sure how to do it. That's the time that you should be doing more research. Anything outside of that, it's fine to do it, but let's call a spade a spade. It's just entertainment. It's nothing more. We just convince ourselves that it's, education and worthwhile because it has print on demand or e-commerce in the title, which, don't get me wrong, it's better than cat videos, but still, if you know what your next step is, shut down the YouTube and get back to work. And then this naturally leads to shiny object hopping from one thing to the next, because you don't really have a clear plan. You're not really sure why you're doing it in the first place. And you're doing surface level things at best. So you're never really diving into the hard stuff that the business actually needs, which means you're never making real progress. And then you're constantly opening yourself up to all these shiny object sources. So you're constantly seeing new ideas, and your brain is essentially brainstorming around new opportunities rather than diving deep into the one that you have in front of you. So this ends up with a subpar amount of input, creating 3 designs-ish, being doubtful each step of the way. and refreshing ads dashboard or sales dashboard obsessively and not really taking any action. And this leads to us being busy, but not actually productive. And there's no momentum and no system that's compounding. And we end up, ending the day feeling overwhelmed and unsure about the progress we made or, questioning everything. On the other side, the 1% of print-on-demand sellers start the day by reviewing their clear goals and their plan for the week. And they start the day off by doing the number one most important thing for the business. It's normally the hardest thing, the thing that a real easy way to gauge this is think about the business. What's the one thing that you want to do the least? Normally, that is the most important thing. It's an easy way to start. Then they review yesterday's key metrics, but they're not incessantly doing it. There's no benefit to reviewing the dashboard 15 times throughout the day. Nothing's really changed. A way to tell if you should be checking more often is there something you could see that would cause you to take any follow-up action? Because if the answer is no, then it's just, again, entertainment. Next, they focus on one task at a time. So they set their number one priority and they knock it out before they move on to anything else. And they don't convince themselves that, just by starting with the light work today, I'll work my way around to the complicated stuff that I'm putting off later on in the day when my, focus and dopamine is depleted. They know that that's not true. They know that they need to do it first. And so an example of the things they might do that could be the number one priorities is creating 10 new designs and launching ads. And again, back to the graphic at the beginning, realizing that, when you get to the 1% side, a lot of them, they're just focusing on the products. Then they review their test results, which implies they are doing testing. And then they post their insights or they have some kind of community that they're connecting with. At least in my experience, this was massive. My own learning and results was dramatically, exponentially increased once I joined a community. Before that, I was learning at the speed of 1. Then once I joined a community, it was 12 of us. We were learning at the speed of 12. When you join a good community where people are openly collaborating and sharing. And so this results in them ending the day with measurable progress. And they have a pattern being set of focused, intentional, consistent, high leverage work. So the strategy side, so we talked about the mindset, the behavior, and this is where there's 1% sellers on Etsy, Merch by Amazon, any platform or approach. But in general, just statistically looking at the vast majority of sellers, they start on Etsy. So they want to start a t-shirt business, and Etsy is extremely popular and easy to start. And there's tons of YouTube videos on it. So it seems like a natural choice. So they go through a couple of videos, hopefully don't buy an overpriced course before they've even tested the waters, and they end up uploading 5 to 15 designs. Then they start waiting for organic traffic, working on their SEO for their listings, maybe putting a handful of dollars into ad spend, and they end up getting few or no sales. Honestly, less about Etsy, more about probably their designs in the beginning just aren't very good. But as a result of this, they can either look internally and view it as objective feedback and an opportunity for them to improve, or they could find a way to blame the algorithm or Etsy rules, or, worse yet, shift to another shiny object, or the worst possible, just quit entirely and just go back to what they were doing. And this leads to them never really building a brand or, learning the traffic strategy. And this is why, and an insight here is that the majority of print-on-demand sellers statistically stay on Etsy following the path of least resistance, which naturally leads to high competition and low control and not building a long-term asset. Opposed to the largest print-on-demand sellers are ones that want to build a long-term brand. They want to own their audience. They want to own the business and be establishing a real asset that can actually compound over time. So they start by doing niche research and validating their products. And then they choose Shopify and it's less about Shopify. Pick any standalone site builder where it's not a marketplace. We have a 31 plus hour course showing how we do that to control customer data and the experience. And they build a lean brand with a clear offer and, more importantly, a clear target audience that they're serving. And they design 100 plus products using, trends and iteration. They drive traffic through paid ads. So all of this, it's a lot more to learn. But once these sellers, again, they're in it for the long term. They know that they are locking in for an X period of time, and they know that they want to hit a certain dollar amount because what it's going to do for them. And they have a clear understanding of what those benefits will be. And then they take all of that and they know that they want to build it into a brand, something that they actually own, that they can eventually exit from. And so they end up going through the steeper learning curve, albeit granted steeper, but worthwhile, because a learning curve is actually a barrier to entry. Barriers to entry when you're building for the long term is a good thing. When you're only building for the short term, or you're not even really sure that you want to be doing this in the first place, then yeah, you should take the path of least resistance. But when you're sure that you actually want to be building a business and you're not just, convincing yourself of that, then building a real brand is the way that the majority of sellers go, because it creates sellable asset with predictable cash flow. And I could do a whole segment on just that, but it comes down to the email list. When you have your customer list, that's predictable cash flow. So the top 1% use systems to test and validate and scale instead of hoping and waiting. And on the tool side, the 1% of sellers, they pick a handful of tools, like the bare minimum necessity tools, and they get really good at just using them. Opposed on the 99% side, again, back to working on surface level stuff and jumping from shiny object to shiny object, they just jump from tool to tool. And so they end up with a bloated, tech stack. And so in total, here's the journey of these different sellers. What I would recommend to really get ahead of the majority of the market is set your sights where you want to go, and not just some arbitrary number, but why not only you want to go there, but you have to go there. Why there is no other possible option but getting there. And so this journey entirely depends on your own answer. Because if you decide you only want to be making an extra 1,000 to 3,000 per month, and that's totally okay. I'm just a proponent of self-awareness. And if that's actually the goal, don't pay lip service to the goal is $30,000 per month or something. Just because that's shooting yourself in the foot before you even get started. But depending on those two paths that you decide between, the number one thing is just staying laser focused, locking in for a set amount of time. If you're in this for the long term, I personally highly, highly, highly recommend building a brand because of all the downsides of Etsy. Not to say Etsy isn't a good place to get started, get your feet wet, all that, great. But if you're in this for the long term and you want to be building like the top 1% do, highly recommend establishing your own brand, because that's the trend that I've seen again and again and again. I've seen people come over from Etsy with their products and launch them on their own brand, and they take off really well because it's well established. Not to say there's any guarantees or anything's easy, but we do have a 31 plus hour free course explaining step by step how we do this process and what's allowed us to scale 8 different brands to $1 million in their first year. And it's all there laid out for you. So don't go buy some overpriced course. Try out the free process where it's based on $25 million in sales. Just go see if it's right for you. Just do some exploration. And then whatever you decide, I just recommend putting on your blinders and going all in for a set period of time. And if you like this kind of content, please comment down below what stands out to you, what resonated, any questions you have, and that helps us know what kind of videos we'll be making more of in the future. So without further ado, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.